Live from the Talking Joe Studios. It's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to another episode of Talking Joe. And as we're recording this, we're live. We are not live later on when it is pre-recorded, as always. So today we will be looking specifically at the After Action Reports Volume 2. It will be a 144-page book. It will cover all English language G.I. Joe comic books, officially licensed by Hasbro, published by Image, Devil's Due Publishing, Dreamwave, and Hasbro from 2001 to 2008. Plus, it will have lots of extra things like the fun publishing comics and magazines from 2008, as some might call it, and to 2017, which no one calls it. The After Action Report will be an informative, easy-to-use, in-hand guide book that is both a checklist and a photo guide to all of the versions and covers of the comics produced during the Devil's Due era, an era that we are very fond of and very invested in doing our Devil's Due shows at the moment. And it's currently as a Kickstarter, so you can all get involved in that. And with me today to talk about it is one of the men behind that project. It is Josh Eggebeen. Here we go. Josh,
hello.
Welcome.
Hello, everybody.
How do you pronounce your surname? I probably made a mess of that, didn't I?
Nope, you said it right. Eggebeen. Right.
Excellent.
On the moon.
So where are we finding you today? It looks sunny.
Well, I am currently in a park in Salt Lake City. I generally live in Moab, and that's where my comic vault is with all my comics, so I usually do podcasts from there, but I'm an Uber Lyft driver, so I got taken away to Salt Lake last night, so thought I'd sit in the park and get a little outdoor air. And, you know, because comics are always indoors.
Well, that's it. Yeah. I do try and sometimes on a hot day sit on the chair, recline in the garden, and break out a comic book and try not to sweat too much.
Yeah, you can't get watermarks on a comic book.
Yeah, but some books are there for reading. Well, all books are there for reading first and foremost, in my mind. So that's great. And the magic of technology, you're finding yourself on 5G out in the middle of open air talking to us live. That's fantastic. So it's probably worth noting at this point, you're part of a tag team behind this amazing project. And sadly, Roger Taft, your co-conspirator, is not with us today as he's been somewhat unwell. So back at home now. But yeah,
basically the update is we were in MegaCon at the end of May, and then he had health problems and was in the hospital, have been posted. He's home now, but he's still not well. So I get to hold the fort down until he's well again. We are very much a team. Yeah. So basically with Roger and I, it just kind of breaks down to like, I'm like the copy and paste guy and he's the design guy. I mean, that's rough estimates, of course, for both books. And so he's, very much still under the weather, and Joe Fest is about 2 weeks away from now. We will have a booth there, and I don't know if Roger will be able to make it or not, but I will definitely be there representing, and we'll have the booth in the book.
Excellent stuff, and yeah, the JoeCon kind of date is key, I guess, to your timing of when your Kickstarter is finishing. So we've got 23 days to go, and that timing isn't arbitrary, right? That
correct.
We've got a logic behind that.
Yeah, so we basically and thank you to all the fans. We premiered the Kickstarter on the first day we were at MegaCon in late May, and we funded in 2 days. The first volume took 3 weeks to fund, so we were really surprised at how fast it funded with those 2 days. And then we planned it to end a week after Joe Fest. So, you know, what we discovered on the first one was that people got home and were like, "Oh, let's fund the book." So that's why our dates were. I think we were like 40 days or something. So definitely a little longer, but it was focused around our 2 events where we were in person.
Yeah, it must have been like all of the word of mouth since your volume 1 came out that that now much more people know about it versus the first Kickstarter that people have found out after the event, and now they can get in on the ground floor on volume 2.
Yeah, and you know, this was the thing that Roger and I, when we came up with this concept of the book, it's like there's nothing else out there like this. A guidebook for all the different covers, you know, and like for volume 1, it's the Marvel era, so it's basically more of along the lines of direct market, newsstand, and Canadian price, and you know, second prints and stuff. And that's in the era before they used different covers, but they are different covers. And so now we're into the Devil's Due era, where it's literally A, B, C, or a different cover, and you know, it's been that way now for 20 years. So you know, and eventually we'll get to volume 3, which is IDW and all their crazy covers. So it's like even more on the insanity level. But you know, so that's what this book is about. It's a comic guidebook to help collect comics, and is specifically for GI Joe. It's all these variants. So now, like I said, with volume 1, we spent, you know, over a year getting that one all finished and ready, and it's in hand now, and you can go to afteractionreport.net and buy it right away, or you can go on the Kickstarter and do a volume 1 and a volume 2 backer, and get both of them at the same time with all the extras. But if you just buy it on the website, you'll get it much sooner. Volume 1, I'm talking about. Volume 2 is
Right.
Volume
There we
2.
go. So I was just trying to find it. So there's a combo pack, After Action Report, Volume 1 and Volume 2. But people, if people go this option, they're not necessarily going to have to wait a huge amount extra time, because you're not starting the book in 23 days time.
Right.
Are you?
That was one of the many lessons that we learned. Because basically in 2020, so Roger and I have been friends for a really long time, and we've done a lot of GI Joe stuff online with Yojo, and you know, international comics and all kinds of stuff like that, where him and I have interacted for a long time on comics. And he called me during the 2020 shutdown with the COVID and says, "Hey, do you want to do a project that'll take a year?" And that turned out to be volume 1. And we did the Kickstarter first because we didn't know if anybody was interested. I mean, obviously there's all these toy guides from like Mark Belmo, James Kavanaugh, Carson, Dan Klingensmith. Like, those guys have done some really fantastic books. And I know you've covered them on your shows. So we were like, well, let's see. And then of course, you know, like I said, it took 3 weeks to fund volume 1 out of the 4 weeks that we ran it. And then we went over, and we did 4 stretch goals. So it was really successful. And again, like we said, we were kind of like testing the market. Do people want a book on GI Joe comics? And apparently they do. So thank you all. So now we're at volume 2. So what we did is we're basically about 85% done with volume 2, and now we're running the Kickstarter. It's compared to running it before we made volume 1, because we didn't want to have to make people wait a year. So as soon as we get all the funds from volume 2, then we will very likely send it to the printer within just a couple weeks of that. You know, we have final touches and all that stuff. And then hopefully there'll be no global shipping crises or whatever. I mean, our volume 1 sat on a boat for 3 weeks in Long Beach Port in California. You know, we're like, okay, well, we can't do anything about that. And then so that was, you know, obviously that stuff's out of our control. So, but the idea is that you'll have the book in hand. You finish the Kickstarter here in about 20 days or so. And then it should be sent to the printers and come back over. In theory, have it in hand by November or December of this year.
Excellent.
So
Excellent. And
much faster turnaround.
Anthony Shortbox has said, I missed volume 1, but as we say, do not fear, because you can back it. You can include it in your Kickstarter pledge, or you can head on over to afteractionreport.net today.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. If you want it very much sooner than later for Volume 1, but you don't get any of the stretch goals if you buy it on the website.
Right. Okay.
You'll get the Volume 2 stretch goals if you do that package plus the combo.
And when you all of these books will get back from their boat from China, who's being lumbered with all of the packing it and shipping it out?
That'd be me and Roger. Roger lives in Florida and has a shop. It's called Atomic Age Artifacts, and it's a collectible store. So he has plenty of space for storage and stuff like that. So he gets the burden of doing the shipping, although I will help him on the day when it arrives. But like I said, I live in Moab, Utah, so it's a long way away from everything.
Right.
So
one of those places where, when people ask how long it'll take to get somewhere, before you even know the destination, you can say it's going to be a long time.
Yes. Right. So it made way more sense to have Roger do all of the shipping because, like I said, we don't live near each other. But, I make it over there to Orlando fair enough amount of times because Joe Fest has been there, and we've attended the last 2 Joe Fests and Toylanta. Like I said, we just did MegaCon. So there's a lot of Joe-related stuff going on over there in Florida.
Excellent. Let's kick on over to the next image I've got. So let's talk a bit about the main cover. So you've magically been able to get Josh Blaylock, the main man behind the Devil's Due era of comics, to do your cover. What a coup! If anyone's going to do it, he's got to be the number one, surely.
So he did the sketch, which you can see the full sketch on the left, and then on the right of the screen there is the colored version. So he did the sketch, and then he had his Devil's Due crew do the coloring and the inking. And so it's the first time that him or any of Devil's Due people have done a cover since 2008. So as you said, it's very much a coup. It's very, very cool that he was able to do that for us. And obviously the book is his era. He, as the guy who got the license in 2001 and brought thousands of G.I. Joe fans back to the comic shops and back to collecting comic books. It's a pretty big deal that he did it back in 2001. So we're honored that he did it for us. We will have a full cover reveal again, as we spoke about Roger. Roger was going to do the reveal, but he's under the weather still. So we'll get to that eventually. Probably in the next few days to show the full cover with all the title, but you can see a little bit on the right and the left there.
Yeah, as you say, that sort of that launch kind of from Josh Blaylock, he sort of brought a lot of people back to the G.I. Joe comics, all of these lapsed people who might have been just following G.I. Joe, and having it back in the shops is enough for them to get back in and pick up the book. I think I'd pretty much lapsed from comics at that point because I'd gone away to university and moved on to less childish things, I guess. But seeing G.I. Joe come out did bring me back into the comic book shop. And if I was buying anything, I would always still buy G.I. Joe through that era. I think it was it much the same with you? Was it G.I. Joe brought you back again?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge trend for our generation. All the, Gen X people who were born in the 70s mostly, to do exactly as you said. Like we collected the comics and we collected the toys when we were, 10 years old and younger. And by the time we got to high school, everybody's like, I don't want to deal with toys anymore because it wasn't collecting. It was just playing with them. And then by the time you get to around 2001, we're all in our 20s and and have money and jobs, and it's like, wait a minute, G.I. Joe's back in the comic shop. Oh, great, I'm back into comics and toys. And it's a very clear pattern that happened to most of us, not all of us, but like Roger, I know he was working in a comic shop, and so he kind of never really went away from collecting G.I. Joe, which was actually part of the inspiration for these books. Like he wanted to write a book in the 1990s on all the toys and everything and comics and everything like that. But then, of course, it didn't happen. And then other people wrote books for toys. And so that was taken, and then that's when he came to me in 2020 and was like, "Hey, Josh, I know you have all the comics because you never stopped collecting from 2001." So when I walked into the shop, which happened to be on right across the street from where Devil's Due actually made the comics books in Chicago, that
Oh,
comic
wow.
shop there. Yeah, I didn't know it at the time, but I saw it was issue number 3 with Zartan. And so I bought that one. I bought number 1 and 2, and then I bought the preview. And then I went home, and the wonderful world of eBay opened up to me. So I did that, and my first purchase, I actually, because you can kind of look that stuff up. It's hard to, you have to, but my first purchase was some Action Force comics from the UK that I had
Okay.
known about, but I had never got. So I bought like the whole run, all 50 of them. And at the time it was like $40. Like it's ridiculous. Then I was like, well, that's a lot. Now it's like you could never get
Yeah.
it for $40. So that was the beginning of me coming back to collecting. I mean, as a collector myself, I had always gotten every issue. I was a completist collector before I even knew what the word was. In the 80s, I mean, I bought a bag like those number 35s, 36, 37, 38. Like they came bagged with a card. So I bought
Yeah.
a bagged one, and then I bought another one so I could open it. So that was my official completist version of collecting. That I did, like I said, I didn't even know the word, and I didn't even really know what I was doing. I was probably 12 or something, 13 at the time. But now, as a collector, like I collect anything GI Joe that's printed, that's comic related, that looks like a comic or is a parody or actual comic. Every cover. Got about close to 6,000, and I got a whole
Wow.
bunch of them from the different other countries. I got like 12 different languages in 25 countries or something like that. I don't have full runs, of course, but that's actually a volume that we're going to do in the future. Would be volume 4 and volume 5. We're doing international ones.
Nice. And how does Roger's collection of comics compare to yours?
So he didn't really collect the IDW era, so he doesn't have a whole lot of those. And I kept going, so I have all of the pretty much about, I'd say 95% of the comics from the IDW era, but Roger didn't continue with IDW, so he had all of the Marvels and the Devil's Due and a ton of international ones.
Mm-hmm.
So we have very common conversations about those eras, and he's been picking up some IDW ones here and there, but I got all of them, so that's why he kind of came to me. But I mean, it's like probably 30 short boxes of just IDW ones, so it's a
What?
lot.
What? Crikey.
Yeah,
Crikey. That's one of
when
those
you
variants.
yeah, I mean, it's not just like the real American Hero continuity; it's the crossovers and the Hasbro universe ones with ROM and Mask and all those too. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. And you're talking about your first issue that you picked up from the Devil's Due era, the one with Zartan on the
Number
front
3.
cover. So a story behind that, which you probably know already, is that that J. Scott Campbell cover was originally drawn with Zanya, Zartan's daughter, on the back of the swamp skier. But Hasbro said that it was too sexualized, and they're like, it was a dad and his daughter. But anyway, so they had to go and revise it, and so the published version is different to the original concept. So out there somewhere is a different version of that cover.
I have heard that. Part of what we're doing in Volume 2 is we've interviewed a whole lot of the different creators. We got interviews with Blaylock, with TIm Seeley, Mark Powers, Marshall Dillon, and they all kind of talk about like how Hasbro was very like restrictive with them compared to what they were with Larry Hama in Marvel. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many people really remember this, but G.I. Joe issue number 1 came out on September 12th, 2001 here in America. And of course, that's one day, after our country was attacked. So it's very kind of like lost in the muddle there of that, how our world changed. But it was very much a part of that. And, Josh Blaylock, when we interviewed him is very aware of how that was like, as time has gone on, he's like, that was a key point of the book being released on that day. And of course, there was no delays or anything like that because it was just, the day after, and, our world was different from September 10th to September 12th. So, but we got our first G.I. Joe comic book, and that's to bring joy and happiness to us on those dark times. So
yeah, absolutely.
But the interviews and a lot of the focus of our books is basically like that kind of time frame of how in 2001 when he brought it back, he brought G.I. Joe fans back to the comic shop. He brought G.I. Joe fans back to buying toys, all as we just spoke about a little bit earlier. And it's a very key moment. And maybe, I mean, like this last weekend, Top Gun Maverick was like the #1 massive, awesome movie. Ghostbusters Afterlife and,
Yep.
Jurassic Park now all bring back the original cast and things like this. So, there's like a through line to that 80s nostalgia that he was able to usher in the comic world, but also beyond that. And so it's very much we're trying to focus on that. As again, when you're talking 21 years later, it's very cool in retrospect to see how important some of these things are. At the time, you never know. So, and I think Josh Blaylock himself feels that. He feels like he was a big part of that. So it's pretty cool in the interviews that we got for him. We got a lot of pages in there of his interview, kind of following his path. Because, I mean, he's still publishing. I mean, Devil's Due Publishing is still publishing, new original content today. Like they do Kickstarters and stuff like that. So he never gave up on publishing. I mean, it was like his passion for life and everything. So it's very, very, very much a part of him. So I got some people passing me here. They're going to go play soccer.
Okay. Yeah.
But,
it was the Devil's Due books very much spearheaded kind of, that kind of nostalgic element of bringing back these much loved properties that people had loved in their youth, and sort of bringing it back and modernizing it. And sort of the precursor to that, just a few months ahead of Josh Blaylock launching Devil's Due G.I. Joe #1 was or Image #1 was the Wizard sort of articles with the J. Scott Campbell artwork, which kind of had that amazing G.I. Joe art and kind of influenced, I think, Josh to then tap him up to do the covers. Are you going to be featuring some of that in the Wizard work in the book?
It's interesting because we've kind of run out of pages, and we had planned that, so it's on the bubble right now. We are doing some of the previews that, like, the Devil's Due was on the cover of the Previews magazine. We are putting that in there, but the Wizard ones we're gonna try. We still got about 5 or 6 pages that we have to figure out what to use for volume 2, which is why the book's not 100% done, because kind of when you're making these books, it's like, what do you put in? And this was a huge lesson that we learned from issue 1 or volume 1, was like the interviews turn out to be quite difficult, because it's like just like what I'm doing here, where I'm doing a video. Well, we would transcribe that to written word, and then you get like 50 pages of written word that you got to put down into 3 words, and you got to get rid of the ums and ahs and how all this kind of stuff that in conversation we say, but when you read it on a page, it's like, okay, what are we doing here? So we learned a really hard lesson that way, and that delayed us probably a month trying to sort out the interviews. So we've already gotten all the interviews done for volume 2 now. They're all transcribed and edited, and like I said, we gave Josh Blaylock a lot more pages. So we actually incorporated a lot more interview pages from the beginning for volume 2 that we didn't really incorporate for volume 1, because so then we had to cram like volume 1's interview pages into just a few pages. So now we had more freedom, a little more space.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, the sort of an interview that is spoken suddenly becomes in a transcript massive. I feel like we spoke to Josh Blaylock for like 2 hours. That's probably like book length just on its own.
Yeah. And I mean, again, like it's ridiculous when you look at it. How many times do you hear people go, yeah, you like, like. It's like hitting the Facebook button, like. But so like we said, we actually have more interviews in volume 2 than we had in volume 1. And another big thing like that we kind of realized for volume 1, we had Larry Hama, Rick Parker, and Rod Wiggum, and then Kirk Bazigian did our intro, was that the basically like those guys, it was a job, right? When they got G.I. Joe, and Larry Hama's talked about being in the last office on the left all the time, or and it was a job. Whereas like with Blaylock and almost every other comic book artist since then, it's like, how much of a G.I. Joe fan are you? What were your toys that you played with when a kid? Because now, I turned 50 here in a month, and most of all of the artists and stuff that you look at are, they're in their 30s and 40s doing G.I. Joe work, and so they were in the same time frame as us, as kids, and then returning with Devil's Due, and many of those artists were just starting their career, and now 20 years later, like they're the main artists for the G.I. Joe comics, and they kind of like, oh yeah, when I was 20, I was reading G.I. Joe back then too, or or at least they were in the shops again. So
Absolutely.
that's a kind of our focus is of the different books and the way it's been. And of course, after we do volume 2, we're doing volume 3, and we're calling it Larry Hama's Real American Hero IDW. And that's going to be 155 to 300. And of course, we can't finish that book till they release 300. And we're really hoping that they don't do 300 covers for 300.
Have you tried to figure out the maths on it yet? On how many covers there actually are? And
well, right now, so like I said, I'm an Uber driver, so I kind of have my own schedule I make. But my car broke in February, so I couldn't work for about 2 weeks while I was driving. So what I did is I decided to just make volume 3. So we already have volume 3's pages from 155 to 250, pretty much 100%, and that's 80 pages of the volume 3, and that's only to 250. So we still got another 50 to go. So there really won't be in volume 3 much beyond what Larry Hama's 155 to 300. So I mean, I honestly, I don't know how many covers it is, but it's a lot. So, and obviously for 300, there'll probably be 100 covers. I mean, if they do 50 covers for Snake Eyes Dead Game, I mean, why wouldn't they do? Everybody gets in on all these comic shops all around America. Like, yes, let's make a G.I. Joe cover. Which, for me as a completist, it's so fun, right? I love it, but my wallet totally hates me. My wallet is always like, stop.
Yeah.
But the completist collector in me is like, I'm buying it.
Because I mean, sort of a regular issue for a while was getting like 7 variants. It'd be like A, B, retailer incentive, and then there'd be like lots of store incentives and convention. It'd be just you get to a normal issue like maybe something like 291 or something, and it would just have 7 covers and be like, this isn't even a a landmark issue. It's just a regular plain issue.
Yeah, there's cool story going on, but like even the covers don't even really match the story or anything, So it's very interesting like that. And like I said, as a completist collector, I've got the majority of all 3 of the volumes plus some of the international stuff is all comics that are in my collection, which is the main reason we were able to pull off doing these books, because I can just scan it, and I can pull it out of my box and scan it, and it's in the book. So that, and Roger knew I had this big collection, so when he contacted me in 2020, he's like, hey, let's do this, because we could. So and it's just like many of the toy collectors like James and them, they all have these massive collections, and they can pull out the toy and take the photo of it. So it's kind of in the same category like that with James Cavanaugh's books and stuff. So
I guess you can probably make it tax deductible or something now as well, right? I don't know.
You know, we're not making hardly any money. I don't think we actually made any money on these books, so I don't think I can claim it as taxing, but it might be worth trying.
Yeah, I mean the amount of money you must spend on variants, it might be worth having a look.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
The mailbox has always got some kind of like slip saying, "Hey, you got a package." About probably at least 2 a week, I'm sure still. But that's why I'm an Uber driver. I drive a lot, so I'm like, I can buy more comics. I don't need to eat, but I need to buy comics.
Oh dear. Okay, let's move on. I think the next one is the big reveal. So
yes. So
you had.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say you had a stretch goal of $13,000, and you've just very recently matched that or met that. So let's have a firework effect.
Nice. I love it.
And there we go. And that meant that we've been given the exclusive reveal of the back cover for the book. So why don't you tell us about the cover, how it came about, and what the theme of the cover means to you.
So obviously the artwork is Lady J, and 20-year-old spoiler alert, she dies. And so that was the theme. On the back cover of volume 1, we put Scarlet in the middle, and we had Stalker and Snake Eyes on one side. So we kind of are going with the same theme with Lady J in the middle, and that's Hawk and Duke at her gravesite. And the artwork was done by TIm Seeley. It has not been colored yet or inked, but that's pretty close to what will be likely the final. But it was very cool that TIm Seeley was able to do that. And of course, he worked on like all kinds of G.I. Joe books and was part of the group of the original Devil's Due crew. So I mean, he had his finger on many of the different series. So it was very cool that he would do that cover for us. And of course, like that's our theme with a lady in the middle and the guys on the side. And as we said, this is the first time we're revealing it because we just hit 13,000. It was interesting because we funded so quickly. Our stretch goals were like way under what we were by the time we, got to the, after our 48 hours of funding, we were way past our original stretch goals. So it took us about a week to sort out like what are we doing next. And of course, the back cover was the stretch goal from number 1, and that was art by Rod Wiggum and then colored by Tom Feaster for number 1. So this one, we haven't figured out the colorist for this one, but like, so we got Tim to do it. When we were interviewing him, he's like, yeah, I'll totally do it. And again, he hadn't done a G.I. Joe cover or any G.I. Joe art in like 15 years or something. I mean, these guys do sketches at conventions and things like that, but actual artwork on a book. So it was very exciting that he agreed to do that. And as you can see on the screen, there it is. Rest in peace, Lady J.
There we go. Excellent. Yeah. Look forward to that. Yeah, again, as you say, sort of when it comes to that era, TIm Seeley as the artist is the name that comes to mind because he had such a long run with Brandon Jerwa, a few issues before that run, and then also as a writer and doing the odd issue here and there after that as well. That more than any other artist, he's the guy that I associate with the Devil's Due era.
Yeah, and he did volumes 3 and volume 4 of the G.I. Joe Transformers crossover.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Where he literally just threw in every mythology from both franchises and was like, let's do this, let's do that. Matrix Leadership, Joe Colton, Adventure Team, the Yetis and Unicron. It's like, okay, it's all in there. Let's put it in there. So those are some pretty cool stories that Tim wrote, and he talks about that in the interviews, and we put that in the book. So it's pretty cool. But that was like where he had a little more free reign, and Hasbro was like with the main book was a lot more restrictive because again, post 9/11, with all the military and with terrorism being real compared to a fictional Cobra Commander. So the Devil's Due really ran into a lot of different issues, and Hasbro was changing people in and out and stuff like that. So it's you know, it was a different era, different time, and you know, they definitely had a much harder time, probably even now than IDW has. So we
Yeah.
touched upon that, the difficulties they had in dealing with that. And, you know, I mean, again, our world changed so quickly. And, you know, all these companies had to adjust, just kind of like with COVID. All of a sudden, COVID hits us, and all these companies have to adjust. And, you know, now we got me and Roger made 2 books out of it. Whereas if COVID hadn't come, we probably would never made these books. But, you know, you get free time and all this stuff. So these things happen, and, you know, inspiration happens. So it's very cool.
Yeah, well, you know, it's great. It's great that you made the most of, I guess, the opportunity. You know, turned what was a, you know, a challenge for many into this opportunity. Sort of very easy to kind of, you know, let time go by, but actually to produce something takes, you know, some real kind of effort, and sort of rewarding to have something come out on the
And
end of it.
Roger and I are rookie bookmakers. I mean, you know, Carson and James Kavanaugh helped us a tremendous amount with like advice and design work and stuff like that. So we had some really great, you know, other GI Joe guys who've made great books to really rely on and jump off from. So we you know, you know, at this point now we're kind of like on our own with the designs, because, you know, our book looks a little different than the rest, but those guys helped us a lot. So got to give them props and credit, and they're still out there making books. I mean, Carson's thing was out insane, how high he did, and now James Kavanaugh's got the Collectors Club. I think you did interviews with both of them for that stuff, right?
No, I did. I talked to Carson, but I've not spoken to James.
Okay.
I think it might have been Order of Battle. I did a very good interview with him.
Oh yes.
I listened to that not too long ago. That's if you want to find out more about the club, go check that out. That's a good chat that they had. It's good that the community sort of is so you know, comes together and supports one another in the different endeavors. It never feels like there's too much you know, competitiveness in terms of feeling like one person is succeeding at the expense of another. It's, you know, very much, you know, we all love this brand and these different, you know, the toys, the comics, let's celebrate them together.
Yeah, exactly. And there's the Action Force books too, like that, you know, the big hardbound. I got the first one and Kickstarted the second one, and it seems like in the last like 2022, there's just like one Kickstarter after another that just is funding super quick. And so very lucky and proud. Thank you, Joe community, for allowing me and Roger to be a part of this. And you know, we're doing our own little niche, but you know, without backers and the money that comes in from Kickstarter, you can't get these books printed. I mean, you know, that's not cheap.
Yeah, but you've paid your dues, you've paid your devil's dues, because you're not you're not new to the community, are you? Because you were sort of big on big in Yojo on the comics side. Because when you were doing this project, I was like, that Josh, I recognize that name. Where have I seen that name? I've seen that name loads of places. Where? And then I was like, oh right, it's like when I ever go into Devil's Due and look at the you know, the comics reviews, and I scroll down to the bottom.
There
we go. Summary by Josh Eggebeen. This is G.I. Joe issue 33 that I've got on the screen, The Road Less Traveled, which is the last one that me, Tim, and Jay talked about on the Devil's Due show.
Yes. So I mean, what's interesting as you know, so there was a G.I. Joe comic book forum called G.I. Joe Reloaded that was created by Phil Cost. And Phil's not really so much in the community anymore, but you know, he was a huge part of that early time frame with forums and you know, all that stuff when so many of us were learning about each other and meeting each other and being like, that guy's got a big collection and that guy knows this and that guy knows that, and you know, like and it became like the G.I. Joe Declassified group that's been at many of the conventions and things like that. So a lot of, you know, with like bringing really rare stuff. And, you know, but in the early 2000s, that's how we all found each other. And that's actually one of our intros is from Justin Bell, who runs General Joe's. It's called Reborn now. But he's done an intro for us for the book. We actually have another intro from Sam Wells too. this is for volume 2, but he talks very much about how that community kind of rose up, right? I mean, you know, G.I. Joe was always kind of divided between 12-inch guys and, you know, the 3 3/4, and then, you know, it became comics, and, you know, then as Hasbro goes along, you get all these other iterations and stuff like that, and, you know, it gets very divided. But I think now, you know, it's come back together where with these different Facebook groups where everybody can be a part of every Facebook group, whereas back in the day, in the early times, the forums, like everybody wasn't there, you know, because everybody wasn't on the internet and didn't have phones and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, to really be able to just scroll through and look at all this stuff, you had to really invest. And, you know, everybody had a code name. my code name was Antarctica. So if you ever saw any posts on any of that stuff, you know, because the Devil's Due forum was way ahead of his game. I mean, like, you know, Josh was selling comic books in 2001 over the internet from his website. So, you know, like that's a whole nother aspect of and as I was saying, Justin Bell has done a really cool, like, introduction about how the community has, you know, kind of transitioned from one thing to another. But like, and so many of us are all still around. I mean, like, you know, very active. You go to Joe Fest, I'm like, yeah, I know you for 20 years now. I didn't meet you in person until I was at one of the Joe cons, you know, which are now, you know, no longer happening. But like, so that aspect of our community is very much still very active out there. And, you know, again, that all came about because of issue number 1 with Image and Devil's Due.
Yeah, and the Devil's Due forums, like you said, so forward thinking and ahead of its time. It's, you know, 2001. You know, internet is a different place to you know it is today. You know, Facebook is still a few years away from being invented, and I was there every single day, basically logging into the Devil's Due forums to just you know chat all things G.I. Joe. And
did you have an avatar name or code name?
Yeah, I think I called myself Sparky on that.
Okay.
There was a few Brits, so we'd sort of typically sort of fill up the forum overnight, and then all of the Yanks would log in the next morning and be like, "Oh, the Brits have been in and they've, you know, put in all of their comments." And so there was a handful of us who would in the UK who would be you know, quite active on there. So I set my avatar for a while as being a little gnome on a computer, because someone commented that the sort of the Brits would come in like little sort of worker gnomes, you know, like, you know, like in that fairy tale about the gnomes making like the shoes in the shoemaker's shop overnight. So yeah, it's cobbling away overnight on the forums, and then coming back and finding what we'd done. So yeah, I was there almost every day, and occasionally told off for going on when I shouldn't be.
I was always holding the fort for comics even then. I have the toys. I have my figures that I had when I was a kid, but I don't collect the toys. The only toys I collected are the figure packs. So I was always kind of like the guy on most of those forums is like, I'm comics. And then G.I. Joe Reloaded came about, and that was all comics. It was the first like forum for all comics. And so Phil Cost was like, hey, I need you to do some summaries, because G.I. Joe Reloaded was a new continuity that came out. It only ran for 13 issues. But so that's how I got my start to where I am today. You know, I mean, Phil was like, put these up on, you know, here's a summary. And so then I ended up with Terry Dizzard, Phil Donnelly, and Jeff Bowen and Roger Taft were all kind of over there with Yo-Joe. And then they're like, hey, you want to do the comics? I was like, yeah, sure. So, and as you pointed out, I did all these summaries and everything. So Terry Dizzard nicknamed me the Silent Ninja Joe Editor, because I would just post up, do all the work, and I never posted that I was doing it publicly, or, you know what I mean? Like, you know, the toys were like, oh, here's this reveal and that reveal, and I just put it up there. So eventually he's like, you got to post it up there, you know, every time you put something new. And so that's kind of where I got my start. And, you know, I basically didn't stop doing Yo-Joe stuff until a new company bought it, and then they locked us all out, that whole drama and stuff like that. So I haven't posted anything new and I probably will never post again on Yojo, but I ran from probably 2006 to 2016, so a good 10-year run of the comics that are on the screen right now. So
yeah, incredible amount of work that must have gone into it. Yeah, so yeah, hats off to you. And it's a shame that we sort of only get so far into the IDW era, and then it stops. But maybe somewhere like 3D Joe's will sort of pick up that mantle and run with it.
yeah, I believe the last stuff that I did was the First Strike, Revolution, Hasbro crossover universe stuff. I think that I got a good portion of the beginning of all that on there, and then it was done. So I don't think I made it all the way to the end of that universe. But yeah, it's definitely just passion. I mean, never got paid for any of it. I mean, obviously, we do these Kickstarters to fund it, but it doesn't pay us any money. And it's just for the love of GI Joe. It's comics are my passion. I a long time ago I had all kinds of Marvel ones and stuff, but in 2002 I actually was moving to California I worked in Hollywood for a long time. And I sold everything but my GI Joe comics. I had like the all the 80s Superman and Suicide Squad stuff, and the Marvel Comics Presents and Wolverine. I had all that early 80s stuff, and I sold it in 2001 on eBay for thousands of dollars. So I was always happy, but I'm like, man, that it's tens of thousands now. But so comics has always been my thing, and in our world today with comic book movies and Disney Plus shows and all this stuff, it's like great, super awesome. And an entire generation's growing up where they're not the geek or the nerd who's like, oh, you're a comic guy, or I
was gonna say now it's got to a point where there just isn't enough time in a day to watch all of the comic book influenced movies and TV shows and stuff like that. There's just so many of them that we're spoiled.
I got in a very interesting conversation the other day. So like Trekkies for decades were looked at as like these weird people who went to conventions and dressed up and learned other languages and were like Klingons and whatever. They gave the little Spock sign and everything, and it's like they were just ridiculed and made fun of and total nerds. And now it's like the coolest thing to do. I mean, I was just at MegaCon, and then right after MegaCon I went to Star Wars Celebration, and like the cosplay is insane. And these are 100,000 people showing up at these events, and as Generation X people, we had to kind of suffer through that time frame to get to where we're making the product now. Our generation makes these movies and makes the comics and all these things for these other generations who don't have to suffer through being subjected to being tortured because you're a nerd, because you know the difference between Star Wars and Star Trek.
Yeah. No, it's his shoes on the other foot. The geeks shall inherit the earth.
Yes. Yes.
Let's get back to looking at some stuff from the book. So what we're looking at here, it's a sort of a sample page showing showing some of the layout of some of the regular issues and character spotlights and things like that.
So that is one difference that we're doing from Volume 1 to Volume 2. Volume 1, we didn't really focus much on characters. We did do an article on Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow because you have to do that with them in number 21. Mm-hmm. But Devil's Due did a really good job of creating some really cool new characters. So we're spotlighting them. Yeah, as you can see on the screen there's like a panel. And, we sprinkle them throughout all the different pages. And, we this time around, and because we actually have a little bit more content than we did during the Volume 1, we're sprinkling more of that kind of stuff in, as you see there. Like Volume 1 was just very much like newsstand and direct market and all that kind of stuff, because that's what we felt we needed to explain, because it was somewhat relatively new information for a lot of collectors. Like, I didn't know there was Canadian variants, whereas most people know that there was multiple covers for Devil's Due. So that's what
Yeah,
that
and
page
there's
looks
a
like.
few unexpected variants as well. On our Facebook group the other day, someone flagged that there was an issue where a politician was going to be assassinated, and in between reprints, I think originally it looked like Dick Cheney, but they changed it to look like another politician in the subsequent reprints. So there's a few subtle tweaks here and there as things get fixed in reprints or in collections.
I actually watched the episode of yours, and I learned that was all new information to me. I didn't even know that they had done that. And I know that like several of the trade paperbacks actually have original content in them in the Devil's Due era stuff. Like one of them has Lady J's funeral in it, which like if you
Oh,
don't have
wow.
that trade paperback, like you wouldn't know it. It's like 6 or 7 pages. So
What?
we're highlighting that. Yeah.
Crikey, this is news to me. I think I must have never seen this.
It,
I've got the Snake Eyes declassified
yeah.
trade paperback, which has that sort of silent interlude prelude story, which is really cool. But I didn't know about any of the others, so yeah, I'm probably missing out on some of these stories.
It's the Devil's Due trade paperback with the red shadows on the cover. I believe it's number 7 of the original run, not America's Elite. And I think it's 6 pages, and it's her funeral. One of the other trade paperback has Snake Eyes and how Storm Shadow captures Scarlet before issue 21. So of course that would have been now considered disavowed storylines, but so the Devil's Due is throwing original content into the trade paperbacks. So when we are putting that in the book, you have to deal with that as a it's like, okay, you can't just put the cover in there and say it was released on this day. You got to talk about it. And so these are the kind of crazy differences that as we've gone along and figured out. So yeah, it's been a fun trip with volume 2 because it's a different book than volume 1 by a lot. So, and then of course, as you
and it's the era of variant covers begins.
Right. So one of the very interesting things that we discovered that was like the terminology of what a cover is called, right, is very much like changed, or some of the words weren't like retail exclusive or retail incentive, weren't even real phrases. And so we were like, okay, do we apply the modern phrase to that time, or do we use the phrase they were using at the time? Because sometimes they didn't even call it anything. It was just like another cover. It's not even cover B or cover C or anything. So it's like very, very tricky doing that. And so ultimately we just decided to call it what it was, and then use like a logo from a modern thing. So like if they just called it C, but it was actually a retailer incentive, we put a little logo that says retail incentive and cover C, because how do you solve these things? And again, you just, as authors, this is what we had to do to make it up. And luckily both Roger and I are pretty much the G.I. Joe experts. So oftentimes, this is weird now, but we would ask other people in the community, and they're like, well, we don't know that, we would ask you. And I would be like, okay. So Roger and I would talk about it. We're like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. So that's what we did. It's a very strange sensation as a human being to be like, yes, you're one of the top experts, and we would ask you. And I'm like, wow, okay. So and Roger, like I say, Roger's got a huge bunch of knowledge on this stuff too. So that's what makes us a really good team. He does the design work. Excellent. I'm the copy and paste guy, and then we talk about it as experts to get it right.
Very good. And the sort of talking into the variants as well. We had this sort of the Transformers crossovers, which were very cool thing, and they sort of really took that ball and ran with it. But as part of those variants, they had all of those interlocking covers, which can be tricky images to kind of find and assemble. Kind of so it's cool that that you're kind of doing that in the book, that you're having all of those interlocking covers up against one another, so you can see the full image. Because those are very, very cool images.
What you see there was like one of the first times they did that, but like in the IDW in Volume 3, it's like every week or every month, every covers from. So it's like it's a consistent thing for the next 20 years of comics. But yeah, that was one of the main things we wanted to do, because they never did that in the Marvel era. They didn't even do a wraparound covers. So
yeah, and we've got a big new interlocking cover variant starting with issue 296, I think it is, the Jamie Sullivan Cobra lineup.
Right.
Another very cool.
I saw that announcement. And also too, speaking of crossovers, they just announced an Striker with Stalker that transforms into what's the Transformers character? Yes, Bumblebee. Yeah. I'm like, that's amazing. I was like, I saw that. I was like, holy shit! Like here they go. They're now they're finally doing GI Joe toys as Transformers. I mean, that's I was even I don't buy toys usually, but I was gonna buy that, but it was already sold out, which no surprise. But so I mean, like the crossover history between GI Joe and Transformers. I mean, it starts with like back in the day when G.I. Joe was only a 12-inch, toy. And so we actually did an article in Volume 1 that kind of covered the Marvel era of the crossovers. And now we're doing another article that really explains all the different crossovers. And then, of course, we'll do a third one that will lead into the Hasbro universe and the Tom Scotty stuff like that for Volume 3. Because it's a total... And now it's just, as I realized they announced this thing, I was like, okay, now I might have to figure out how to work in these new Hasbro toys. But I mean, it's such a big deal for these crossovers, and it's a long that so that's another thing that we're focusing on, that will run through all the volumes. So that's been fun to track, because you don't really think about it.
And the guys working. Sorry, I was going to say that the guys working on these brands as well, not just the comics, like the Devil's Due guys and the IDW guys. It's also the likes of the toy creators as well. They're sort of people who have grown up, as G.I. Joe and as Transformers sort of fans, and now they're the people, building them, and they want to make them as best as they can possibly be. So when you get an Striker that transforms into Bumblebee, that Striker is going to look exactly like exactly like an Striker is meant to look like. It just looks so authentic. It's sort of quite mind-boggling, really.
And when I saw that, I was like, it doesn't even look like Bumblebee. It's all G.I. Joe, and then they just gave him the name Bumblebee. I'm like, it kind of looks like Bumblebee, but Bumblebee's a yellow character from a VW Bug. I was like, it's very interesting, because Transformers has become such a massive property, well beyond G.I. Joe, that they make a Transformers toy that's a G.I. Joe toy, but it doesn't look like a Transformer toy, the traditional Bumblebee, but they're like, okay, we're going to do the traditional Joe toy. So I think that was really interesting when you look at that, and it's like, maybe that's Hasbro's way of trying to, get G.I. Joe back into popular culture. I mean, Snake Eyes as a movie, didn't do very well. And even though they had The Rock and Retaliation, that was a well-received movie, but it didn't really spark a new generation. But maybe a new generation of Transformers toys that are G.I. Joe can really bring in some new collectors.
Or maybe lapsed collectors, those Transformers those Transformers collectors who go, hey, you know what, those G.I. Joe,
those G.I. Joe guys are cool. So
just had my computer conk out for a little bit, but I think we're back now. And we were in the middle of looking at the Dreamwave section of the book as well. Do you want to talk a bit about that? And yeah, you've got some little exclusives there. I'm not sure if I've seen these images before, but if I have, it was probably probably the best part of 20 years ago when they first were solicited in previews or whatever.
Yeah, so basically this is the volume 2 called Divided Front that Dreamwave produced. Dreamwave as a company, of course, went bankrupt after releasing only the first issue. And but they did solicit, so there are covers and summaries and stuff like that. So we put those in there, because they're out there in the world. They're very hard to find, and they were on Yojo when they originally were released. So those pages are still around. But so we put that in there. Of course, that's issues 2 to 6, and it's they were never released. And actually, in one of the Joe Cons in the 2000s, I asked I believe it was Andy Schmidt about it, and he said that they were tied up in legal because I guess Dreamwave and the artists, when they went bankrupt, aren't allowed to release that stuff. So they IDW did make a trade paperback of the World War II series, but they can't get their hands on any of those issues. And obviously, there's artwork out there somewhere for them, but it's locked up in legal stuff. And,
wow. Okay, I didn't realize. Yeah. So you think that there's quite a good chunk of that artwork was actually produced and has just not been seen?
Yeah, at least issues 2 and 3 have to have the interior pages done, because I mean they released 1 and number 2 must have been pretty close to being done. I mean, comic books generally work about 4 months in advance. So, but so we talk about that. We talk about Dreamwave's bankruptcy and stuff like that. So it makes for interesting, juxtapose. Whereas Dreamwave gets Transformers, and then they do this crossover, and then they go bankrupt, and Devil's Due just keeps going. I mean, it's really interesting how well that worked out. Dreamwave was a well-funded company at one point, and, didn't make it. So
yeah, absolutely.
So that's something there. So then this page here is what we call plus more. When you look at the title of the book, it's 2001 and 2008. And so when we originally were doing the breakdown of how many pages, it turned out that we were way short of 144 pages. So that's like every book we'll do will be 144 pages. So we were way short on Devil's Due, ironically, even with all those alternate covers. So then we were like, well, let's throw in the fun publishing stuff. So, and when you look at fun publishing, like they did the con edition, and then they had a retail edition. It was called G.I. Joe vs. Cobra. And then they did over 100 issues with original content that were the subscription magazine.
Wow.
And so it was a lot of stuff. And so we were like, well, let's put that in there because it's not anywhere else. That's what's very interesting about it. There's some of it's on yojo.com, but like not anywhere else. So we're like, our book will have the first detailed list of all the fun publishing stuff. Now, again, that's just G.I. Joe. They were doing Transformer stuff, so we don't have any Transformers fun publishing in there for the club stuff. But I mean, the Collectors Club is a huge part of our world for 20 years. We all got together at the conventions, and, they made toys and they made comics and they made all kinds of stuff. So we really felt like they deserved to have a whole section. And like I said, it's probably 150 covers, probably maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 pages, something like that. So so that's the plus more of our book, even though it's not within 2001 and 2008.
And then in your comprehensive era of other things happening at the same time at Devil's Due, we start getting into the all of the Hasbro comic packs. They ended up releasing quite a few, and quite a lot of cool stuff there in both comics and toy format.
Yep, they made original stories. They did half issues between the issues, like 21B and 32 and 36, and then they reprinted with three figures, and they reprinted with 2 figures. And James Kavanaugh has allowed us to use his figure figure photos. So we have really excellent photos of the figures, even though we're not a toy book, but we figured the toy pack had guns and backpacks and all such stuff. So we had to actually, do a whole new design. Again, Roger did that to incorporate, the comic pack. Because one thing I realized as a collector was that like I didn't have all of them in near mint, so I had to actually go buy toy packages and buy them as toys, even though I hadn't bought a GI Joe toy in a really long time. I'd buy comics all the time, but so I was like, oh no, I don't have them. So I had fun doing that, collecting toys again. But
Cool.
yeah, so and again, this kind of is the example of how varied the books are, in terms of like what was sold and what they were printing, alternate covers and toys and all kinds of stuff. So it makes the book interesting having the variety in there.
Yeah,
And
they
again,
even did some. They did some funny things with the toys as well, because they did a couple of like variant covers, didn't they?
Yep.
And they also had some unreleased issues as well, or digital only issues, unreleased and digital only issues, in fact. So
yeah, it was funny is the book's not finished yet, so we're really debating on how to put that in there. It's so difficult. It's kind of like the Dreamwave we were just talking about. But like those, digital unproduced, are they official? Are they unofficial? You know what I mean? Like, so we'll probably find a way to throw them in there, but like it's not a feature because we're trying to stay with officially licensed Hasbro products, like not, creator things and things like that. So, if it wasn't officially released by Hasbro back then and has never been, and some fans found it, like, where does that fit? It's very tricky balance to, when you're trying to get collectors, a book that they can collect and they can check off the box and be like, that's in my collection. And then this is not actually out there. You can only get it digitally. I mean, how do you collect it digitally? I don't even know.
you just have to buy the iPad and slot that in your long box.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or if you have some kind of like digital collecting system or something like that with a database, and you put it in your database as a digital file or something. I don't know, but yeah. So those things, we haven't quite figured out how we'll put those in there. We'll probably find a way. Just like maybe one panel that says, "Hey, this is out there somewhere."
Yeah, this is a thing that kind of exists. Yeah. And then so we'll get on to some of the Kickstarters again. And in terms of updates, breaking news, we've also got the reveal of the issue, of the front cover now for volume 2. So the full glorious color artwork. I think Roger Taft must have been watching our live stream and gone, oh yeah, I better get that out there. So as we were speaking, he's done an update on the Kickstarter and posted the full color Josh Blaylock art. Looks great. Great cover.
Yep. So, like I said, it hasn't been done since 2008. Devils do create a cover, and of course it'll have the logo After Action Report on there, but there it is. And it's got, Kamakura and Zorana, a couple DDP created characters on there. So
yeah, that's a good touch. Yeah, you've got Kamakura, obviously, sort of appear. I think it was first issue he appeared. A
first panel
creation. Was it the first panel? First
yeah.
Wow.
When you open the book, that's him. He's crawling through the mud or something like that.
That's right. Yeah, he's on the espionage mission at the Dreadnoks swamp base in Florida. Yeah, Zanya and that shipwreck design that became quickly a firm favorite. I wonder if we'll get to see that shipwreck design in the toys in the classified series before too long, because they've said they're going to do a shipwreck. It could be this one. It could be the Devil's Due version of shipwreck rather than the sailor bell bottom look.
I mean, the Devil's Due era designs of the characters that were originally from the 82 show up all the time in toys. I mean, there's a lot of them that have been inspired by the Devil's Due costumes for the same characters, so you see that pretty regularly. Again, it's not exactly, but it's designed. inspired, I guess is the word.
Yeah, like with the snake eyes, I think they were the first ones to put the tattoo on as a symbol on his costume, and then that ended up appearing quite a few different places, I think including the movie Snake Eyes. So,
Yeah. Well,
cool.
speaking of the movie, so when you look at the movies, they're very much inspired by Blaylock stories. The first one, Rise of Cobra, was with the whole nanomites. That's the first 4 issues, right? So they took that, put that in the movie. And then the Snake Eyes is very similar to a digest anime kind of book that Josh Blaylock did called Arashikage Showdown, where with like the snakes and the jewel and all that stuff that's in the Snake Eyes movie comes out of that digest book. It's really crazy to read. I went back and reread it just after Snake Eyes, after seeing the movie, and I was like, holy cow, they took from Blaylock's work again. I mean, like they have the Hammer characters, but they're using Blaylock stories. It's really odd, but I guess that's maybe the influence of a character created, or from fans. You know what I mean? Like instead of Larry's original stuff, where the Hollywood people are like, that's let's do something different. Oh, here this hasn't been done, so let's take from there, kind of thing. I don't really know if that's true or not, but like it seems kind of like it because 2 of the movies are based off of his stories. And those are things that Blaylock actually wrote.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I got an email from him immediately after he'd watched the film because we'd spoken to him at the same time that the Snake Eyes film came out, and he was a bit like, as you say, "Holy cow, these are my ideas that are ended up being in the movies." That's wild.
Yeah. So Blaylock's influence is beyond just the comics. I mean, obviously with the movies and the Hollywood writers, they're like, hey, I like this story. Let's put that in the movie.
Yeah, cool. Right, we went on a bit of a detour there. We were about to start talking about stretch goals. So the next one coming up will be some dog tags at 15,000. So not too far away. That's it, within almost touching distance.
Yeah, these are the actual pictures of the real stuff, and it's just kind of like a giveaway kind of thing, So, dog tags, G.I. Joe, it's a stretch goal. We have beyond this dog tags, we have a couple more stretch goals. We're gonna just like we did with the front, the volume 1, and I believe actually behind you, you have a couple of the prints that we did for the volume 1. So we're doing the same thing with the sketch cover of Blaylock's half finished, and then the full color one. So those will be prints, and then the final one we're doing if we get to 20,000. So everybody there, go up your backing, so we can get to the 20,000 stretch goal. And it will be a metal bookmark that is the 40th anniversary of G.I. Joe comics. So that will be a very unique little stretch goal. You don't see metal bookmarks too much, but you know what? We are selling a book, so it works.
Good stuff. Cool. So that was us. That was my prompts for volume 2. Any more thoughts on volume 2 before we sort of wrap up that?
I mean, obviously, we're very excited that it funded so fast, and proud to be part of the Joe community of writers and books and all this stuff. And thank everybody for supporting us. I mean, it's going to be another book packed with a lot of information, and we have more books coming. We got volume 3, which is Larry Hama's IDW Real American Hero, and then volumes 4 and volume 5 will be international books. And then if people want more, maybe we'll go into the IDW, Hasbro Universe books. But right now, the international ones will probably be the 2024, and that's a whole nother wild ride of making a book. And we got a bunch of people from a bunch of different countries helping us, because like Roger and I can mostly do the volumes 1, 2, and 3, but no way can we do volumes 4 and 5 by ourselves. Just too many people, too many books published everywhere. And we've recently discovered that G.I. Joe IDW Hasbro Universe comics are being published in other languages. We discovered them in
Uh-huh.
Dutch and Turkish just in the last like month. So it's like, oh my God, not only is it hard enough to do the 80s stuff, but now we got to track down modern stuff. So that'll be very fun. And those books will, I can't expect as many people to be interested in those, but like, it's clearly like one of these like untapped areas of GI Joe history that nobody's really talked about much. International toys are well documented and for a long time, but not the comic.
Yeah.
And they were doing, comics in 1982 were coming out in French, in Canada. So it's been with GI Joe the whole time in other languages. Devil's Due even has a few in Spanish.
Uh-huh.
That came out.
It sounds like you're gonna send a whole bunch of people on a crazy treasure hunt once this book comes out.
Yes, and they're already like the guy who found the Dutch, his name's Rob Arts, found the Dutch, and then is now tracking down the Turkish ones. Is like, yeah, I'm totally over here in Europe hunting for GI Joe comic books that are new on the shelves. It's like, oh my God, really? Seriously? That's crazy. So that's that's really what's for Roger and I. From a long time, I started as soon as probably in 2002, I started finding international comics, starting with those Action Force UK ones, Battle Action Force, and then oh my God, they're in other languages, they're in Canada, So I was collecting way back when it was easy to find them on eBay. Now it's hard to find them. So I have a lot of them, and Roger has a lot of them, and we don't really have a lot of crossover. So we're like, okay, we can put these in the books, and then we ask other people, like, yeah, I have this, and I'm like, I don't have that. Can I buy it from you? No, but we'll put it in the book. So
I guess some of the appeal of the different books is almost for different reasons. Like for me, seeing the original volume 1 book, it's just great to see those iconic covers just all together in the right order, because I'm constantly sort of trying to, particularly with the podcast and things, trying to think back to which issue number and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm just always happy to look back at those classic covers, and the reading order for them was not too complicated. You started with issue 1 and you ended up with issue 155, and there was a few special missions and various things in between, but for the most part fairly straightforward if you just wanted to collect things without going too far into collecting all of the different printings and things. Whereas once you get into the for example, like the IDW Hasbro verse that you talked about, then you're getting into a crazy world of just the volume of different series and what's the right reading order and when they came out, and never mind all of the different variant covers. It's a whole world of complexity.
Yeah,
and then I guess
and for the after action reports, like, we don't have plans to do those books, because honestly we don't know how much demand there is. I mean, like, are there gonna Real American Hero, Marvel, and Devil's Due, they have a lot of fans, but the Hasbro universe stuff, I don't know if they have enough fans for us to devote a year to do those books. But ultimately why we chose to do the international books is because it's Roger and I's passion, and even if people aren't as interested, it's clearly very unique. And the amount of variety of books, and from China and Indonesia and Greece and Turkey and Middle East and all the South American countries. I mean, so much variety. They were just like who cares? Let's in the 80s there's no internet, so nobody knows. Nobody's ever gonna find this book. Well, and now we find it, but because we have the internet and eBay. But at the time, the Hasbro, or I think it was actually more Marvel, was like way more loose on what was allowed, because again, if you made a book in South America in the 1980s, it never made it to America. Now it does. But so it's very interesting, and that's why we're hoping those books people will follow up with Kickstarter for that one too. I mean, we're not going to expect the gangbusters of the other ones, but like, it's a passion project, the whole thing anyway. So everything with after action reports, all passion.
And do do you have you sold off your childhood comics collection, you kept it with GI Joe, but have you spread out into comics since? What's your comic collecting looking like beyond just the world of GI Joe?
I collect Star Wars comics, but I don't collect everything. I'm not a completist for that. I just try to get as many of the stories because I like the continuity and I'm a big Star Wars fan. So it's more about the story. So I just get whatever issue I can find usually, and that's all the Disney stuff. I don't have pre-Disney comics. Just I've mostly been getting since 2015, but I don't get them all, and I don't get every series. But other than that, I don't have any other comics of any other consequence unless they're like that Deadpool homage cover to number 21,
right?
Stuff like that. So I'll pick up those. But,
it sounds fortunate that you've not. It sounds like you're not one of these people that sold your childhood collection and then have spent the next 20 years trying to buy it all back again. So you've not tried to go back and buy the issues that you sold back in 2001 or whatever it was.
That Real American Hero Marvel #1. That's the first comic in the first box of mine. Was bought way back when I was 10 years old, and still with me my whole life. Now that I almost turned 50 in a month. I was joking with my dad the other day, and I was like, "It's all your fault. Like, you're the one who took me to the comic shop, and you're also the one who took me to Star Wars in 1977. I blame you for all of it." And then he laughs and he goes, "You had so much fun." And of course, my dad has been helping edit the books, both Volume 1 and Volume 2. So, and he's a retired minister, so he's spent a lot of time, writing and stuff. So we send him in within 20 minutes, he's back. He sent it back to both me and Roger, and we're like, "Shit, that was fast. I'm not ready to edit it yet." But so he's helped out a lot. But he started it all for me, both for Star Wars and GI Joe. So, and that's a very common story. The fathers took the kids, and the kids just love it. Now they're adults and taking their kids, and all kinds of stuff like that. So.
My dad took me to Star Wars, and my dad bought me my first issue of Battle Action Force back in the day.
Oh, wow. So your Battle Action Force was the first. I have all those, and I read them all, and I even read some of those secondary stories that are not related to GI Joe at all. That's
they're great.
Very violent and really cool. But way out of the realm for kids that especially modern day age. But back then, I don't think they cared. They're like, yeah, whatever, it's war. The Generation X kids, they're tough.
Yeah, we were exposed to the horrors of the Somme in the Charlie's War. By just that one of the best, I guess, comic strips ever published in Britain. That it's astonishing piece of work.
Yeah, and of course it's mixed in with a toy, a toy property.
We didn't get toys of Charlie's War of dead soldiers and a playset of a trench filled with rats and
and bombs and bomb holes and everything.
Exactly. Yeah. It was dark stuff.
Yeah.
There was a lot. Yeah. And kind of actually timely. It's being brought back this month with a special written by Garth Ennis and a series of A-class artists. Not specifically Charlie's War, but I think they're doing a battle action special, which brings back some of the strips from Battle and Action.
Nice. I mean, it's it's I always looked at Battle Action Force as like a cousin of Real American Hero. You know what I mean? It's kind of they're in the family, but they're, not really in the family kind of thing. But
kind of got to squint a little bit to see it.
But they're so unique, and it's very much a glimpse of the time period. And we are, but I'm assuming you're familiar with Blood for the Baron. That website, James Marshall. So we're not really doing Battle Action Force, but in the European Volume 4, we're going to spend some time talking about it, but we're not going to break it down per issue or anything like that. But we definitely have to acknowledge the UK universe in the international books. Because, it's an expansive and extensive section. Not only, the actual Flint and Snake Eyes characters, but the other guys too from the like Blades and all them. Like they have a pretty extensive history, and of course the Collectors Club acknowledged them, so they're definitely a big part of the history.
Yeah, it's good. It's it's very much his own thing, but yeah, very enjoyable, and yeah, I'd sort of look forward to that getting posted through my letterbox once a week, because our local news agent, I don't know if that's a term that you guys would use, like a corner shop, they'd sort of do a round, and the kind of the equivalent of the paper boys, they'd do a regular round, and they'd deliver the daily newspaper and the any magazines that you'd subscribe to. So a lot of the UK editions of weekly comics like Battle Action Force, they'll often have a house number drawn, sort of scribbled in pencil or in pen in the corner of the book. So a lot of copies of the comic, you'll find either a house number or a name, because that's how they did it when they delivered it, so that they knew which address to send it to. Of course, they're not thinking about trying to keep it mint for collectors who want to look at it 20 years later or whatever.
What? Like if I find an international comic that's in G.I. Joe, I don't care the condition. Give it to me, send it to me. I'm buying it. No cover, torn cover. Like it doesn't matter, because you just can't find them near mint, or you know what I mean. Like you'd never be able to get a CGC 9.8, international comic. All these hunters who are hunting for those 9.8s would be like, oh, well, I don't want it because it's not 9.8. I'm like, I want it because it's like cool and it's in another language. And then they're like, well, you can't read it. I'm like, are you trying to make fun of me because I'm an international comic collector? Like I'm a nerd making fun of me? And they're like, well, And so it's pretty funny how that works, in terms of like collecting international stuff. And this has been our debate with the scans of the covers for the international. Like some of them are not in very good condition. Do we go in there with like Photoshop and fix them to make them look nice, or do we leave them all bent and creased? And ultimately we're like, you know what, that's just how they come, so we'll put them in there if we can find a better version some point somewhere. But there's a few that are pretty beat up, and when you look at the scan, you're like, why is that in there? But hey, it's it's just the nature of comic collecting in international books. So it falls into that whole category of like, where do you draw a line? Like, do you digitally change something? I mean, like you were talking about with like the Cheney and the trade paperback. You know what I mean? Like where Disney Plus has been changing Star Wars stuff, the Disney Plus stuff that's on like New Hope and stuff like that are a little bit different versions than what were in other versions that Lucas made, and it's like, really, come on, like, how do you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you're coming down the side of not wanting G.I. Joe to be McClunkified.
Yes, exactly. That's like a new word. I heard that the other day. Just like I heard the new word evergreen, which is like where, these properties that came about in the 80s and 70s are now like going to live forever, like an evergreen tree. And it's the same kind of thing, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, so they keep modifying and change it. More Star Wars, more Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's going to outlive everybody, all the original fans. But what's cool about Generation X is we got to be the originators of that. And then because we're in our 50s now and we're like buying all this stuff, we're going to keep it going for other generations. And that was all just stuff that we were just kids buying, you know what I mean? So it's very interesting to look at it that way. Like all of a sudden now these properties are never going to go away, in 2150, the G.I. Joe will still be around in whatever form it's in. Star Wars will be, on episode 550 or something.
Good grief, yeah.
So, and it's cool because like that's our generation. We got to experience that stuff as kids and make it last forever as adults. So. And hopefully G.I. Joe will always be around. I think it will be.
Yeah, and let's sort of talk about some highlights from G.I. Joe. Let's start with Devil's Due, because we're talking about it for the book. So for me, when we got to 2001 and G.I. Joe came back, it was like a sort of a lightning bolt and sort of reawoken my interest in comics and sort of just I was so excited month to month for the next issue, and I was back on the boards every day, and now I'm reading it through with Tim and Jay.
Yeah, those are really great shows, by the way.
Thank you. And we can be hard on it, but we're trying to be objective with it. But it's not to say we don't love G.I. Joe. It's just we can sometimes be a bit tough in terms of our standards.
But the passion is there clearly.
Yeah, and so it's interesting coming back to read them, because I haven't really actually done a full a read through and sort of revisited all of that stuff since it actually came out, and I'm trying not to peek too far ahead so that I'm kind of experiencing it in real time, and it's not just a sort of recycling of kind of emotion. It is kind of trying to have it kind of be a kind of a real reaction to something that I've read just only recently. So that's been a really interesting experience. So what I guess for you, how have you gone back and read them multiple times? I know you did all of those reviews for Yo-Jo and stuff, so we've probably spent a lot more time on them than I have. But doing this exercise, was it similar in terms of coming to them from after a little while, or do you just know them that well that it didn't have that same sort of experience?
Well, for volume 1, I mean, obviously that's the Real American Hero, and we all read those like 1,000 times as a kid, and kind of towards the 90s you might forget some stories. So we tried to put summaries of each episode or each comic issue into the book, but it wasn't always, the stories weren't always that interesting that we needed, so we put fun facts for volume 1. So I, of course, I'm honestly would take my comics out, scan the cover, and then put it back in the bag, and then go on Yo-Jo and read the summaries and be like, I think I'm missing something. And then I kind of like
read the summaries, and this guy knows his stuff. I like this guy.
Exactly. I'm like, I think I'm missing something a little more important now, because when I was doing those at the time, I would do them as they came out. So I wrote them with no past knowledge or forward knowledge or whatever, like whatever they were doing. So a lot of times what I would do for volume 2 was just kind of like, throwing a spoiler. Like, all right, here, this character's going to be important. When, on the summary on Yo-Jo, I had no idea it was going to be an important character. You know what I mean? Kind of thing like that. I mean, like Don Marino in the current IDW stuff is kind of a perfect example how she's just blown up and become a massive character. So like you have to incorporate all the little things that Larry was throwing in with her before she was a massive character. So it's kind of the same thing. And we just, obviously, we're not putting in the word spoiler, but there is spoilers. So, and we felt like the fans knew the Marvel stories really well, so we didn't have to go into great detail in the summaries. And for Devil's Due, we're putting summaries in there for each issue, but they're short. But for the IDW 155 to 300, we're putting full summaries and lots of story content, because we know that people haven't really read them that much, maybe once or twice. So we really feel like for volume 3, the summary of the story has become more important than the fun facts and the other things that the volumes 1 and volume 2 had that the fans know more of. And of course, with history, with 40 years of comics and with Real American Hero and Marvel, and then 21 years now of Devil's Due, like there's been a lot of knowledge. But Larry's been writing for 12 years with IDW, so there's a lot of story there, and
and the other thing about the sort of the story summary for those issues is that for the Marvel era, for the even the Devil's Due era, you could look at a cover and then you could kind of go, all right, I know what, that cover relates to the story. I can kind of, remember what the story would be based on the cover. Whereas for IDW era, the cover is quite often not really related to what goes on inside in the book. So I'll be looking at an issue and I've no idea what happens in this issue until I flip it open and actually see the story, because the cover is just a picture of the Baroness or whatever.
Yeah, and it's funny because earlier on the talking here, I was telling how I did volume 3, 155 to and a half to 250. And as I was going through those, say 175, I was like, I didn't even remember what was happening in the story. So that's why I was like, all right, I'm putting the summaries in there. And so now I feel like I'm really well versed in the IDW stuff, because I was like, I just spent, quite a few weeks editing, and again, I had written them for Yo Joe, and I still was like, I don't remember this. But now I have a really, I feel like I have a pretty strong grasp of the storyline. And I don't really think too many of us adult G.I. Joe comic collecting fans have invested in Larry's intricate stories. That we probably should have, but we're 50s, in our 50s now. We're not in our, we're not teenagers or under 10, being like, oh my God, this is amazing, I'm gonna read it like 25 times. You read it once, put it in a bag and board, and stick it in a box. Mm-hmm. So I really enjoyed doing that. And that, like I said, for volume 3, you'll definitely be able to go through and research all the summaries for each issue in a different way than you will for volumes 1 and volumes 2.
Interesting. And so let's do a best of. So what are kind of your favorite story moments from the original Marvel run, the Devil's Due run, and then the more recent IDW era?
So I always loved the number 61, the Joes getting captured and sent to the gulag, and then that they show up, the Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, and to go rescue Stalker, and the reunion moment. And of course, that's like 61, so how connected Stalker is to Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes through Vietnam and all that stuff. And it's just a really great moment. I always love that series, and it's hard to argue with that number 61 cover in the spotlight with the injured Joes and firing back. It's like I think that's a Mike Zeck cover too. So that was always my favorite storyline from the Real American Hero time. And then I loved in America's Elite, the Sins of a Mother, with Baroness having a child and just going utterly crazy, trying to get her kid back. And Destro's like, this lady's insane. She's not really my wife, but she's the mother of my kid. And we actually talked where we interviewed Mark Powers for volume 2. And he came to G.I. Joe in a very different way than almost everybody else that we've interviewed. And that was his story arcs. And he wasn't really a writer. He was more of an editor. But I love that one. It's just so different. You know what I mean? Like, G.I. Joes don't have kids. And, what would a parent do for a baby? Well, if you're a psychotic, serial sniper killer, you kill everybody, right? They do it in the movies. Why not in the comics? So I always thought that's good. And for the real IDW stuff, I love the Don Marino character. I think it's a fantastic mix. You put you get this teenage girl, you stick this super silent, deadly killer in there, and then he can talk. You know what I mean? Like, finally give Snake Eyes words in a legitimate way. I think that's been really cool. I really like her as a character. Her story arc is, it's all over the place, kind of like how it goes with Larry when he's making his stuff up. But I've really enjoyed her as a character.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and it's not been totally forgotten about. There was a good, interesting issue all about sort of Dawn re-experiencing those kind of memories and the trauma of having that, which was that 292, I think, on the train.
Yeah. Just recent issue this year.
Recent issue anyway.
Yeah,
a good one.
I mean,
Yeah, nice.
like think about that. Like you know, I think she's like 18 or now, but I think when she got the memories, she was 16 or
Hmm.
something like that. And like, imagine that being a 16-year-old and having like war memories from Vietnam. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just a crazy concept that totally works. But like, it has really allowed Larry to kind of go back into, you know, I think it was like 286 or something, where it was the issue where Stalker talks to about how he met Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow pre the LLRP's, you know, storyline that happens in number 26. And it was like
Hmm.
very cool, like to see that stuff. And I'm hoping that here, as they reach 300, that they throw more of that out there. But I'm not sure if he'll do that or not. But it'd be very cool to get a whole bunch of backstory stuff. But I mean, like
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff that like I found that when Larry does that, that's the best stories in during the IDW stuff. I mean, he's done some really cool ones where they're like, you know, the Snow Joes or the Desert Joes or the Tank
Hmm.
Joes or
Hmm.
whatever, and those are pretty cool. Those are usually like one-offs or maybe two issues. I like those two.
Good stuff. Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't really I didn't I think I'm like most people. I didn't really like all the Blue Ninja stuff. It's kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah. I think we had. I think most of us felt like we probably had enough of the Blue Ninjas and probably enough of the Brainwave Scanner. But
yeah.
you know, within all of that, there's some definite gold. And yeah, maybe that the sort of the Blue Ninjas kind of you know, make people remember of that because you know they appeared so frequently, but it's sort of in between some of those moments there's some definite highlights. There's some, you know, really
Yeah.
great moments like for me, I love the couple of issues that they had with the Black Major and the Red Shadows and the
Yep.
Robo Skull when they're out at sea and they're storming the boat and stuff. Those are, I think those are just as good, you know, up there and as good as anything. So there's some, you know, really strong work from Larry and crew in the IDW era. And yeah, it's a shame that maybe not as many eyes have been on it as really it kind of merits. But hopefully it'll continue to find its audience as we, yeah. I think there's
Well,
going to be a lot of excitement as we sort of get up to the grand 300.
yeah. There's another thing that's interesting and happening in the entire comic industry is like, you know, even like Batman is only printing like 100,000 copies or something like that each month. It's like that's so few out there, and you figure, you know, maybe a quarter of them or less than a quarter of them are damaged or destroyed or something like that. So, you know, like, and most of those are just going in a box in somebody's collection, and they're just not out on the shelves to be found. You know, and
Mm,
it's very interesting how maybe 10 years from now, with, you know, GI Joe only printing like 10,000 copies, you know, per issue, like those things might be worth a ton of money because there's just not that
yeah,
many that were even printed in the first place, much less come out of a collection or found. And I'm talking about like an A cover, not like some retail exclusive that
yeah,
only printed
yeah,
1,000. You know, so I think that the, you know, the comic industry, and maybe not so much for GI Joe, but definitely for like Spider-Man and all these that where they're so low print runs for the main series are just gonna skyrocket and be like so hard to find. And I think that's just, you know, the future generations who collect that stuff are just gonna have to pay a lot of money to find them, and they probably will be more protected. But it's just an interesting aspect of where comics are going now.
yeah, yeah. I think you're not wrong there. Even I would pity someone who's let their IDW GI kind of subscription lapse or whatever, and they're trying to go back and recollect them all,
Yeah.
particularly if they wanted to go down the variant rabbit hole. That would be an enormous undertaking. Yeah, yeah. I'm glad that I've been buying them as I've been going along because
Yeah.
I don't. I think it would be a bit of an eye-watering prospect to try and track down everything. And like you say, even the A covers can be quite hard to find if you've not got it that month. They just, particularly in the UK, where I think they really only order for people who have it, you know, specifically have requested it. They
Uh-huh.
don't buy very many for the shelves or to put in the back, you know, back issue bins. That
I'm pretty
if
sure
you've
that's
not,
happening in America also. It's very similar. I think that's the
Yeah.
exact same in America. I mean, obviously there's more comic shops, but you know, that is what the way it's going. I mean, I'm lucky because my comic shop that when I moved to California in 2002, they became my shop. It's called House of Secrets in Burbank, and for now 20 years they've been keeping my comic books, even though I don't live in California anymore. I lived in a lot of different places, and they just ship them to me, even before the COVID and all this stuff. So like I got pretty lucky with that, where it's been very easy for me to do, as you say, like to get most of the covers and retail incentives and stuff like that, because they get it. But even now they were telling me, they go, yeah, we used to have like 15 people that bought GI Joe every month, and we're down to 5 now. So they don't even get the retail incentives. So I got to go hunt them. But they're like, yeah, we know GI Joe. Every GI Joe cover that comes out goes to Josh.
Very
And of
good.
course,
Yeah, you need to make friends with as you say, a retailer, and that's the best. And make sure that they put it aside every month. That's the best way to do it.
it is. It's cheap too. I mean, it's only the cover price, and sometimes they even give discounts. So I'm always like, yeah, why? Yeah. And they charge me the higher price for the retail incentive, and then give a discount. I'm like, okay, good, thanks. So it's
Excellent.
good. But it was actually pretty special when I went into my shop to buy my comics. I was in California just a couple months ago, and I brought them the volume 1, and I signed it. And of course, those comics for volume 1, I didn't live there at the time, but for volume 2, the comic shop that I still get my comics at are the Devil's Due issues that are in my boxes. I got at that comic shop, and then I scanned them and put them in the book. So it'll be really special to bring them volume 2, be like, here's your comics in the book.
That's nice. That's a long-term relationship there.
Yeah, definitely. And they survived COVID and everything, so they're thriving now. They said they're actually doing better than they were before COVID. So it's a very, I think the world is doing different for comics, and of course, as you said earlier, like every day there's some other comic book show to watch.
Excellent. Okay, so I think I've got to get the kids to bed. You've probably got a drive ahead of you.
I do. I gotta go back home tomorrow. But it was fantastic talking with you, and I
think
talk
with you.
Like so few people I can just have like long conversations with comics about, because most of the time they run out of knowledge, and I'm like, I can keep going, but like with you, it's like neither one of us is gonna run out of knowledge. So keep up the shows, and keep up promoting G.I. Joe comics, because there's only a few of us doing it, and we need those toy guys to really start helping with comics.
Yeah, you toy guys, you get out and read the comics too. They need the numbers. But yeah, if we're known for one thing, it's not running out of things to talk about with Talking Joe. That's for sure. And I think with that, we will give a reminder. Check out the After Action Report Kickstarter. The links are there at afteractionreport.net. Few days to go. Get your orders in. Look forward to seeing the book when it comes out. So that big thanks to Josh. And the sign out there is Nobody Beats Talking Joe. Am I going to sing it? An international podcast
of G.I. Joe comics.
There we go. Laters.
Have a That was great, man.
Cool.
I can sit here all day long. I can just keep going.
Looks like you got a good spot.
Yeah, but there's not too many people in the park, so. But I had the
Cool.
5G the whole time. I just hope the wind wasn't too much, but